my electric bill, and they're going to pay it while I'm in the community, getting care and having protected my assets. So my assets, my home that I'm living in, my condo co-op, it's protected. They're paying my bills, and when I die, everything that I own is going to that wonderful child of mine.
So the idea is to bring down their income, quote unquote, bring down their income.
So that's to the 2024 1732. Next year it could be more, but this year it's 1732.
All right, I got it.
Right?
All right.
So you can still qualify. I'm not saying to you cannot qualify. The pooled income trust gets the overage.
Yeah.
And thank you for that question, because now I realize that I'm not making that clear. Thank you so much. So the trusts are managed by non-for-profit companies. What you want to ask is, are any of them owned by people who look like you and I? No.
I have a question. Are you,
Yes.
what if your responsibility for the month is only a small percentage of what you put in that pool? What happens to the rest of your money?
Well, I'm going to tell you very honestly, I would be sleeping on the nicest sheets. My sheets would be 1,000 thread count, because I would have my credit card and I would be on Bloomingdale's buying those sheets. And I would have the best groceries coming in. I probably have people preparing all different types of food for me. I would use the money. I would use the money, because I want you to understand something. It's either you can afford to pay for care or you can't. And if you can't afford to pay for care, I'm presenting an option for you. The option is that you put the money that's over, but yet still not enough for you to pay for care and your expenses, into that pooled income trust, and you use it however you want to use it. Maybe you need a new bedroom set. Maybe, like I said, maybe you want to sleep on very nice sheets. You want to have every luxury possible, but it's unfortunate that you now need this care. So that's what can be done. You can spend the money on food. You can spend it, you could have different clothes. You can have an iPad, the latest version every time it comes out, whatever it is. If you can travel, you can travel. Yes. You have something like a credit card, but what you cannot do is spend that money on someone else. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, hi. I have two questions on the other slide that you had. It's when the individual is in nursing care. The allotment or stipend is $50. Is there anybody advocating for that? Because there's always cost of living adjustment. And are they working on that? The other thing that I had a question on. Oh, sure.
I'm sorry, let me answer one at a time if you don't mind.
Sure.
Okay. This has nothing to do with the cost of living adjustment. This has nothing to do with COLA.
Okay.
The reason why it has nothing to do with COLA is because you're in a nursing home or you're in a rehab. You don't have a cost of living expense.
But
the rehab or nursing home is giving you room and board. They're feeding you, they're giving you activities, you have a place to stay, so it doesn't have anything to do with the cost of living. You mean cost of living adjustment for your hair to get done and your nails and things of that nature? Is that what you mean?
yes, and the other thing that, yes, that's part of it, because those costs go up. And then another thing that I wanted to ask was, I'll let you finish. Yes, that's what I'm referring to.
Okay, well, unfortunately, the federal government thinks that that's sufficient. I understand what you're saying. It's just that they think perhaps your personal needs should be very basic.
Secondary, got it. And on the same matter, is there a protection if the individual that ends up in a nursing home that has been paying for their life insurance policy all these years with their retirement or their Social Security income, is there a way of protecting that from, I mean, how does that get handled? They have to continue paying the policy because if they die, it's a death policy. What is the situation on that case? Because I saw in what you were reading, there's a benefit of $1,500 for burial, but that's not enough in terms of burial expenses.
So if you haven't, that is unfortunately what the federal government allows. I guess that they feel that these are figures that are affordable based on the numbers of people who need care. And in terms of your insurance that is purchased for someone else to benefit, perhaps the beneficiary will continue to make those payments. You're welcome.
I have a question over here. What happens to a person that's requiring nursing care that's collecting Social Security and a pension? What happens to the pension and Social Security?
Are they getting care in the home or are they?
Institution.
It's paid to the institution.
Both the Social Security and the pension goes to the institution? There's no limit? Is there a limit that they can take, or they just take both?
Everything but $50. So very often I meet with clients and they're so against qualifying for Medicaid or even the concept of Medicaid, they don't want me to speak to them about it. I remember meeting with this woman maybe about 12 years ago, and she was from Guyana, and she was already disabled. She too had fell down the stairs one day going to work, but she fell down subway steps. So at the time, although she was disabled, she was living with her sister, and her sister was helping her out a little bit. And so I said to her, when we were trying to decide between which type of trust that she would get, she wanted the revocable trust. And the revocable trust is the trust that does not protect your assets and will not qualify you for Medicaid. So for everyone that has a revocable trust or does not know what type of trust they have, please go home and look. Revocable trust, or what type of trust you have, is usually on the first or second page of the trust. Anyway, so she said to me, I'm gonna get a revocable trust. And I never argue with my clients, but I did inquire. I don't try to force anyone into anything. That's because I give these workshops. I inform you first, then you make your decisions. You're making an informed decision, right? So she says to me, I'm gonna get the revocable trust. So I'm looking at this woman and she's already has a disability. So I said to her, well, why have you decided to get the revocable trust? She was walking, but had a very difficult time walking. She was not a paraplegic. And she said to me, well, I'm from Guyana. And if I get worse, I'm gonna go to Guyana and my family's gonna take care of me. I said, okay. So she got worse. And her best friend called me. And she said to me, Miss Barrow, she's going to a nursing home here in New York. I said, why? She said, well, her family in Guyana won't take care of her. I want you to realize that you don't want your family to have to take care of you. Let me tell you why. Because they are giving up their lives. It is a full-time job. So when I go to work, I want to get off at a certain time and go home and decompress and stop working. If you're working a shift and then you go home. You're paid and you get to spend and use the value of what you worked for. But when you're taking care of a family member, that job does not stop. So she realized that she had the wrong trust. And the nursing home had filled out her application. Even though I told the family that that's a revocable trust and you shouldn't do it. Don't apply for Medicaid through that nursing home. They did. They filled out the application. She later died. Anybody can tell me what happened? Medicaid recovery is coming for her home. So yes, you can get it done by other people other than an elder law attorney, but you haven't done justice for yourself or your family. So let me tell you some Medicaid myths. One, they can take your home. It's not actually that they take your home. Let me tell you what they actually do. They place a lien against your property that gains interest at 9% per annum. I think that's still the amount. I think that's still the interest rate, at about 9% per annum. So it's not that they take your home at that time, it's that they come after your home afterwards by putting a lien on it. So you might go to sell it or pass it on to someone else and there's no equity there. There's nothing there, you're getting nothing in the sale.
Question?
Yes.
Before you go on, would you be able to go over the two different trusts? I think there is a revocable and an irrevocable trust, just as a reminder to those of us who were here last year. But
Okay, honestly, we're gonna get to that. I created this plan as a little bit of a refresher, even though there's a precursor to this workshop. I will definitely go over that for you, I promise. So the next question is, you have to give your assets away to protect them. Well, what happens when you give your assets away? Especially if it's something you're still using. For the sake of this conversation, let's say it's your home. You didn't hear this workshop by Barrow Law Group or the last workshop, so you don't know, and you decide you just want to make it easy for your family to have an asset that you have, and that's the family home. Maybe that's the one asset that you have, and you want to make it just as simple as possible for your family to have that asset. So you deed the home away to your children, and you deed it to them because you love them. So if anyone's supposed to get it, it is your child, right? Or your niece or your nephew or your godchild if you don't have children. And that person has always had a great relationship with you, and so you don't have any fear. But what you've done is you've given up your control, right? If you deed a home to someone else, you're not entitled, you do not have control. When the star check comes in, it's not coming in your name. If you want to refinance the home, you need that person. You need them to appear at the closing for you or to give you a power of attorney. You're reliant on them. You have just lost control, right? And if while they might be willing to do that, maybe they have judgments. Now you've exposed your home to their judgments. You have to pay them in the refinance because the refinancing bank is saying, I've got to be in first place position. So I had a client that came to me. He was referred to me and his son had died. His son had an untimely death. And that son had, he had transferred his home to that son. So he said to me, Ms. Barrow, my son died and I would like to hire you to administrate his estate. Of course, he had no will in place, no plan in place, definitely no trust in place. So I asked him questions, and I realized that the son was survived by the father and a wife. I had to explain to the father, you can't administrate your son's estate, not in New York State, not according to New York State's laws. The wife is in position. And you know what else? New York State law says the wife's the owner. Oh, I was told to go back over here. Yes, New York State law says the wife is the owner. So you were trying to go do something for your child, and you ended up divested of your home. Right? No good, what they say, no good deed goes unpunished. Right. Mm-hmm. So the other thing that they say is if you give your assets away, you have to wait 60 months. That's another myth before you can apply for Medicaid. Well, 60 months is the equivalent of 5 years. But if you've given an asset away that is valued at so high a value, you might be waiting more than 60 months. You might wait 7 years. You might wait 10 years before Medicaid allows you to qualify. Suppose you gave an asset away that was worth over $1 million. Maybe your home has all of a sudden increased in value because of where you live. You give that asset away. They have to divide that 10,000 into that 1 point whatever million dollars. You're going to be disqualified for over 5 years. You could be. So that's a myth. The best thing to do is not give your asset away. Do not lose control, and make it so that your family will receive your assets, but they will receive it at a time that you want them to really have it. And that's where pre-planning comes in. So what is pre-planning? We talked about crisis. Now let's revisit pre-planning. Pre-planning is an estate plan, but I'm not speaking about a will plan. And I am not speaking about a revocable trust plan either. If you're in crisis, as I said a couple of minutes ago, a revocable trust will not help you. You need an irrevocable trust, or sometimes termed an asset protection trust or a Medicaid trust. You need that type of trust in order to be doing pre-planning. And the reason why a will not help you is, one, a will is this document that is not effective during your lifetime. So if you need to be able to set your assets apart from you so that Medicaid won't go after them or a creditor won't go after them, a will doesn't do that because the will is not effective. You have to die first, and then the will becomes effective. So that's a reason why the will not help you. So you need a trust, an irrevocable trust, and you need to have that asset in the trust a minimum of about 3 years. And then a lot of people feel to themselves, well, I don't need a power of attorney. But you need a power of attorney. Did everybody see that Wendy Williams special? Right? We saw the Wendy Williams special? Well, the Wendy Williams special, Wendy Williams lost mental capacity, and now the court has determined who will care for her and how her money will be spent. How can you prevent that? Do you know how you can prevent that? If you have either a revocable trust for for your money, then you've decided who is going to be in charge of your money. The court doesn't need to do that. Wendy Williams had no planning in place, but she did have a power of attorney. And her power of attorney was set aside by the court. And you're probably wondering, well, how did the court do that? They are probably wrong. That's the only document she had. So I opine that that power of attorney was probably created when it was questionable whether or not she had mental capacity. And that goes again to the point that I'm going to keep drilling home to you. Don't wait. Do not wait. If the power of attorney had been in existence for 10 years, what could the court say? If the revocable trust in it was in existence, you have then chosen someone to handle your assets on your behalf during your lifetime. Some people say, oh, I don't need a trust. My bank account says who my beneficiaries are. What happens if you lose mental capacity? Who's getting access to your assets? Is your beneficiary getting access? No, you have to die first. So I think, I know I tell you this story about my aunt in the last workshop. When my aunt had this stroke, and after suffering the stroke, she regained her consciousness. But I think she sat there and pined away, thinking about all the things she didn't put in place. And her niece is an estate planner. I said, my aunt. Yeah.
How long does power of attorney last?
Until death. Until death. All right. So the revocable trust is a trust that allows you to, oh, I was told to stand over here. The revocable trust is a trust that allows you to avoid probate. Not you, but who you leave behind. They're not going into surrogate's court if that trust is properly funded. Isn't that nice? You left a home. Let's say you decided you're just getting a revocable trust, or you left a bank account in the trust, and your beneficiary goes to the bank and says, here's the death certificate, here's the trust documents, give me the money. No court. And if you ever become incapacitated, no guardianship. And for those of you who think that guardianship is only for the wealthy, I want you to know, Barmaya and Queens, that the Queens Surrogate Supreme Court hears guardianship cases every day for you and I, for the average Jane and John Doe, because I'm sure a guardian can be put in place so they can get your retirement money or your savings to care for you. Who do you want to get it? Them or your family? That's the revocable trust. That's all the revocable trust does. Allow you to avoid guardianship, allow you to avoid probate. The law thought so much of those two things that they created that trust. The irrevocable trust is the trust that allows you to avoid probate and avoid guardianship and protect your assets. I only spoke to you today about asset protection from crisis. There's asset protection from other things as well. We're only speaking about one issue, medical crisis. But the asset protection goes beyond that. So that's what an irrevocable trust does. And then also that power of attorney is also very important, but it's important that you have it done in a timely manner, and do not go on a website and download it because you will have a power of attorney that can't do much for you, right? I had a woman that came to me, she had a power of attorney. Oh, let me tell you this story about this woman. A woman came to me one day with her 2 children to have a consultation, and she left, and I never saw her again. About last year, a woman calls me and says to me, my mom has a will plan, which was a will, a healthcare proxy, and a power of attorney. I'd like you to review it. I would like you to create a trust for me. I said, okay. I review the power of attorney. It's labeled power of attorney on the top, but it's not a power of attorney. It was actually a healthcare proxy. I said to her, when I contacted her, I'm so sorry. The document that's labeled power of attorney is not a power of attorney, it's a healthcare proxy. She says, oh my gosh, I had an attorney created. I said, I understand. She says to me, do you remember me? I said, well, your name sounds familiar, but I don't remember you, ma'am. I'm so sorry. She said, my mother, myself, and my brother came to you some years ago. When we walked outside the office, the woman said to her children, I'm not paying that woman $3,500 to create any trust for me. Now, she would lose close to $200,000. She would end up with a guardianship. That asset would have to be decided by the court. Guardianships are also very expensive. They start at $10,000. My colleague gets excited every time I call her up and say I have a guardianship case for her. And it's the worst thing is that it's the court who decides the guardian, and it's the court who decides what powers that guardian has. And that person, if not a family member, is inserted in your family, and they're making decisions that impact everyone. All right, so we're going to go to the one last thing for me to explain, and that is the different types of planning you can do in terms of pre-planning. If you have assets that are over $6.94 million living in New York State, then that is the estate tax threshold as of 2024. Although the federal government's estate tax threshold is $13,061,610,000, we don't look at that when we live in New York State because New York State's threshold is lower. So if you have that type of income, or not income, sorry, assets, and this is per person, then you have to do the type of planning that requires you to try to find ways to reduce your estate taxes, if that's your desire. Sorry? Which one, the New York State? 6.94 million. So if you have the 6.94 million and you want to reduce your estate taxes for your family, then you have to do a certain genre of irrevocable trust. If you don't want to reduce your estate taxes for your family, you don't have to. You can speak to Mr. Welcome and find a way to get liquidity in your estate so that you can get the genre of irrevocable trust that allows you to stay in control. Then there's that picture with the sun and the house, and it looks like they're living good in the Caribbean. And that's for the person who doesn't have the estate tax issue, but has done their pre-planning, and if anything happens, their assets are protected, and they don't have to worry, right? So you can land on tax land and do the pre-planning. You can land in that sweet spot where you're back and forth between the US and the Caribbean, and you're just in a good place because your assets are protected. See that moon going down, that sun going down, it's so nice. Or you could be in a position where you're just meeting with the staff at the nursing home and nothing's in place. But even if you have not put anything in place and you are or know someone who is in crisis, please seek out an elder law attorney. We come up with strategies. However, we cannot save the amount of assets that we can save if you did the pre-planning, but we may be able to still save some of your assets. I want to explain to you that it's so important. Like I told you the story about the woman who went to the attorney and thought she had a power of attorney but actually had a healthcare proxy. If you're pregnant, you're not going to the podiatrist, right? You're going to the GYN. If you need estate planning, please go to the estate planner. Not the estate planner that just became an estate planner over the pandemic, you know. Not that one, because the courts were closed and now they decided to pivot to estate planning because there was nothing else for them to do as far as work. Go to that seasoned estate planner who knows what they're doing, not the general practitioner, the estate planner. And I think that's my QR code. I don't know if you're able to scan it, but that's for you to give me an evaluation. I really hope that you are able to scan it and give me an evaluation. My staff and I meet every Monday, and we look at these evaluations. Like, I'm going to take into consideration the fact that it was lost upon someone here how the pooled income trust worked. That critique is very important to us because what I do, I'm very passionate about, and that is informing the communities that I serve. I hope to shrink the wealth gap one client at a time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Audra. Does anybody have any more questions? Okay, let me come down. Getting my steps today.
So this question is about the revocable and irrevocable trust. So the main difference has to do with protecting your asset in case you need Medicaid. Is that what it is? That third piece? Because you mentioned for the revocable, there were two main areas, and for the irrevocable, that asset protection in terms of Medicaid seemed to be the third. Am I correct?
That's correct, but it's not just asset protection from Medicaid, it's asset protection from creditors. Medicaid is not actually a creditor, it's a payor, but Medicaid does have Medicaid recovery. So the purpose for protecting your assets so that if you ever need Medicaid, you can qualify. But the asset protection is protection also from creditors.
And my last question is, what if I know that there are many people here and we have different levels of income and assets. What if your assets are over $6 million? What do you do then?
You have lots of choices. So firstly, the genre of irrevocable trust for a person that's over $6 million that I usually discuss first is a trust where they would give up control as to the assets in that trust. And the reason for that is because they're now totally separating themselves from that asset and trying to capture the value of it now so that they won't have to pay federal and state taxes, right? So the federal estate tax limit now is over $13 million. It's 13.61 million. It's set to sunset in 2026. So that means that if you're over that limit, you want to try to do that planning now. If giving up control is something that you're not okay with, then there are other strategies that have to be used. For instance, as I said before, liquidity. You may want to know that you have enough liquidity in the estate to pay the estate taxes, and you might be able to secure some type of product to do that. So there's different strategies. If it is a couple whose assets together are over $6.94 million, then there are different types of trusts that can be done for that. So it's a host of different strategies, but it's complicated. It's not as simple as me just telling you something now. I would have to actually look at the person's assets and come up with a strategy that meets their goals. That's what's very important to me, to meet my clients' goals.
I have a question. You spoke on it briefly, but say, for instance, my wife and I, we sit down, we do the pre-planning, we set up a trust. And does it cancel out, say, if we move to like Florida or Georgia or something like that, and the trust is already in effect? Does that cancel out the trust if we move out of New York, or?
No, the trust will be giving full faith and credit if you move out of the state. It's not that it cancels it out, but I would, though, I want to explain something. Estate planning isn't, I created this plan It's here, it's in this portfolio, and now that I've created it, I don't have to look at it again. You look at it just like you do financial planning. Estate planning is part of financial planning. A financial planner should always know an estate planner, and for their clients, they should always be referring them to estate planners. You're supposed to look at this every year and take stock of your finances and take stock of what has happened in life and what changes you need made. So if you have this plan in place, it's not tossed because you cross state lines, but it should be reviewed now that you've gone into that new state. Like, just like even if you created it here, there are laws that change that require me to change a client's plan as they come in based on the changes in the law. So I always advise my clients, I know other estate planners tell them look at it every 3 to 5 years. I don't believe that. I believe in look at it every year. A lot of people have estate plans, especially trusts, that are totally ineffective because nothing's in the trust. The
I had a
trust is
client
unfunded.
that's a good question, by the way, sir. I had a client that recently moved from Texas, and she had done planning before, had a trust in place, and we had a New York attorney look it over, and at the end of the day, it was just some amendments, some minor tweaks, but most of that trust, the language from Texas applied to New York as well, so.
Any more questions? I have one question, Ms. Audra, that somebody actually wanted to know. How much money are you allowed to have in the bank if you're on Medicaid?
So if you're on Medicaid, these are the numbers here. It's the $31,175 that you can have either in the bank or total in assets.
Any more questions?
You have more than that, and it's in the trust. It's protected. Medicaid cannot go after it.
Are there any more questions? Let me just say before, oh, you have a question? I will come down. Thank you for giving me my steps. Hard, smart, here I come.
Thanks for the informative information you have dispersed. My question is, how would Medicaid know you have additional fund you're hiding from them?
All right, have Ms. Audra answer the question. Or Mr. Welcome.
Honestly, you're supposed to turn over your bank accounts and that information, but Medicaid will find it.
They'll find you.
Unfortunately, you know, actually, Medicaid is a federal program that is run by each state, right? So each state has its own Medicaid nuances, but it is a federal program, and you can believe they will find your assets.
Big business, remember.
Are there any more? We have, okay, last question. I have one more statement to make before.
Good evening. My question is, you said that we should start pre-planning. When do we start that? And how long is the process?
I'm going to go on one of my spiels, and that is, I really wish that estate planning and financial planning was part of school curriculums. This is what they're not teaching in schools. And so we're acquiring assets, we're earning money, and we don't have the right mindset. We need to start putting things in place. And maybe at some point, as a young person, they might have a irrevocable trust, or they may have a power of attorney from the time they start working, especially the power of attorney. Parents fail to realize they send their children out to school, they go away to college, something happens to them, they're in another state, but they're age of majority. The parents have no rights. They have no rights in terms of their finances. So if that person doesn't have a power of attorney in place, they've got to be appointed a guardian. You cannot wait to do estate planning. From the time you have a child to a certain age, we are their guardians. Once they become age of majority, we're no longer their guardians. That might be your baby, but you're not the guardian. You can't decide for them. So I try to explain to people that the power of attorney is important for anyone who's become age of majority. But we need to shift our mindsets and stop thinking this is something you wait and wait, or it's for the elderly. It's not for the elderly. I have clients coming in in their 30s planning now, especially people who just understand finances. So people who are finance majors or business owners, these are things that are very important to them. Having an estate plan in place. If you own a business and you own it with someone else, having a buy-sell agreement in place. How do you protect yourself? If you're owning a business, how do you protect yourself? If you have investment property and you own all of the investment properties, have you protected yourself? They're all in your name. Let's stop talking about Medicaid. If you own 2 or 3 properties and they're all in your name, are you protected? I want to be your tenant. One slip and fall and they own everything. And I just spoke to you about the slip and fall. So I'm just going to tell you, I need us to shift our mindsets. The people who have things in place, they did not cut corners. They didn't think to themselves, oh, this is too expensive, but yet we spend money on what we want to spend money on. If you want to do it properly, it's not easy and it's not cheap. Unfortunately. Yes. Everything has to be maintained. You have to maintain your house, you have to maintain everything you have. The law does not protect people who sleep on things.
Yeah, Steve just wants to make a statement.
I wanted to add to what you said. Once your kid turns 18, you should get a health care proxy and a power of attorney, because you're sending them off to college. You don't know what can happen there. They can lose, God forbid. But, some kids have nervous breakdowns. Things happen. They might lose, capacity. And it can be very, very difficult for the parent to have any control or say over what happens.
And you're absolutely, if anybody who has a child, once they turn, let me tell you, that was heartbreaking for me. Once that child turns 18 and you try to go into the doctor's office, they politely ask you to leave. Politely, and I'm saying, I have to go, they politely ask you to leave. So if something happens to that child, and if you send your child off to college, even though you're paying that school fee, that hurt my heart, you cannot call and ask any information about that child unless that child has put you down and authorized you to ask. I said, but I paid the school fee. I'm sorry, Miss Bennett, can't answer that question unless they have put you down. And I told my children, if you don't put me down, I ain't paying no school fee. So what Ms. Barrow is saying is, once that child turns 18, and they get sick, you can't go in that hospital room. They haven't put you down. Who are you? My child, I tell him at the doctor's office, please put me down in case something. I'm not going to pry on you. And I'm going to give it. And I just want to say something. And I told you my testimony before. I eventually hired Miss Barron. Let me tell you, the questions that she asked me, I was like, what? Things that you have to think about. I'm like, are you kidding me? Sometimes it took me weeks to think about what I should come up with and who I should put in. And she was like, you didn't think about it yet? No, because that's a hard question. The things that I can sleep a little bit better at nights because for years I had children, I had no will, I had no trust. And it's only last year that I retired, I had time to sit down with her. You know, you can choose where I sat down with her, and the questions that she asked me, as I told you, it was mind-boggling. I would never have thought of those questions. Who you put in, if this happens, what happens in here. It took me a while. I think she was probably getting frustrated because I have to think about those answers. So it is, so what she said is that it is more costly if you don't have it in place. So some people come in here with $1,000 pocketbooks. Okay, so, okay, just two more questions because I have to go. Marriott and Sister Corazon. And then we're going.
So if you're still employed and you have a retirement plan, does the trust protect that?
Retirement plans are protected in New York State. So if you're employed and your money is in a retirement plan, they're protected until the required minimum distributions have to be taken. So New York State, or generally the required minimum distributions, are now at 73 years old. So from 73, once you begin to take the required minimum distributions out, those distributions are fair game. But while you're working, any of your retirement assets are protected.
So once you get the distribution, if it's not over the amount that Medicaid, the required income for Medicaid, then you would be qualified.
Well, if you're getting the distribution and you're getting Social Security and it's all your income put together, let's say you have rental income, your income from annuities, whatever those incomes are, they're all put together to determine whether you're exceeding the 2024 1732. For some of my clients who have income, I often tell them if they're that age and they have the required minimum distributions, I tell them take more than that, so long as it won't exceed their tax bracket, and dump it in the trust if they don't need it, right? So that they can protect it.
So you can actually dump it in the trust. Okay.
Yeah, one of the questions. If you and your husband have a home and one person is sick and you don't have the long-term care insurance, will the Medicaid take away your home? And what would happen to the other party, the wife or the husband, while one is in the nursing home, if Medicaid take away your home?
So while one person is in a nursing home, the other person is okay.
Yes.
Yeah,
And the
they could keep their home. But let me ask you a question. What happens when the next spouse goes into the nursing home?
Oh.
So
But what
I don't
happens-
want us to be short-sighted. See, you see the question you just asked me?
Mhm.
I sometimes have 2 clients in a nursing home. Then what? How is that home going to be protected? It's not. So if you think to yourself, my spouse is in a nursing home, but I'm in the community and my home is okay. For me, what about the next generation? I honestly implore all of you, do things so we can stop losing our wealth.
And one other thing, suppose you're up in age and you decide to sell the house. This is it. And for Medicaid, will they have to look back to say 5 years to see what money you have? if you sold the house, because don't forget you have children now and would like your money to go to your children and grandchildren. Now, what would happen there in that case? Would they look back to say your house was not sold within 5 years? It's like
They'll
2
look
years or
back.
1 year. Will they take away, I mean, find your asset and take away your money, or?
No, they don't take away your money. They just won't pay
mean,
for you.
You just what?
They won't pay for you.
Oh, they won't
Up
pay
to the
for you.
cost of that home. So in other words, let's say you need Medicaid
Yes.
and you sold your home and you sold it 4 years ago
Mm-hmm.
and you received $750,000.
Uh-huh.
You're going to be disqualified for however long it would take for you to have spent that $750,000 on your care.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Oh, God, that's terrible.
Hello. Could we just give Mr. Kirk, welcome, a big round of applause, and Gabriella and Mr. Barrow? We just want to thank you very much. Wasn't this a wonderful, wonderful workshop with pertinent information? I know everybody's tired. I'm going to ask, Elder Parkinson is looking at me. Could you just say the closing prayer? I know he has had a long day, so Elder Parkinson would be kind enough. And just thank you all for coming. If you haven't signed the sheets, there's a signing sheet here. Please sign it before you leave so that we'll have your names and the panelists will have your name and they can reach out to you. Thank you all very much. Thank you.
Shall we look to the Lord? Heavenly Father, we thank you for being the source of all knowledge, Lord, and we thank you for the knowledge that was presented here today. Lord, we thank you for the generosity of spirit of our panelists, Lord, who have a burning desire to make sure that their people who look like them, are educated in the financial instruments and the ways of the world so that we can keep the wealth that we've accumulated and pass it on to the next generation. Lord, we pray for blessing as we end the Sabbath day, enter into a new week, and we pray your continued blessings and protection. This is my prayer in your Son's name, Jesus Christ. Amen.